Now, there remain shocking scenes still vivid in many people's minds, but it's now exactly 2 years since Birmingham and Nottingham came under attack by rioters. Today is the second anniversary of the unforgettable nights when violence spread through areas of the Midlands.
Police say they've prosecuted the majority of suspects involved in the riots, but they've sent a warning to the remaining few that they will be caught. In a moment, we'll be speaking to Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth from West Midlands Police. But first, this report from Sally Lockwood.
They were days of madness and destruction. A police station attacked by firebombs and high streets raided by gangs of looters. Nottingham and Birmingham city centres resembled war zones.
We could have been actually killed in there if we would have tried to take people on, and we could have died in there.
Dennis Hamilton moved his business to a safer area after the riots, but says he lives in fear of it happening again.
We're still recovering now. Every time you hear there's going to be a march or crowds gathering, you're always weary and thinking it could spark off again. And you know, you just worry. You don't want to go through that trauma. You just don't want to go through it again.
The rioting spread from the city centre out down the Bristol Road here. There was concern at how many young people were caught up in the looting and violence. Almost half of those prosecuted in Nottingham and almost a third of those prosecuted in Birmingham were under the age of 18. A young mob attacked this petrol station in the early hours of the morning, stealing whatever they could and terrorising staff. The justice system came down hard on those found guilty in the immediate days after the riots. The sentences imposed were far harsher than typically given for similar offences, but there's been criticism of the government's response to the issue since. One local MP saying the lessons of 2 years ago have been ignored.
What the government needed to do is support young people who are leaving school now without any qualifications or training. We have long-term young unemployed people who are not doing anything, and this is where we have a generation of lost young people, and we need to bring them back into employment, into useful active roles in community.
A government statement in response to these comments said we can all learn lessons from the events witnessed in August 2011 and have a responsibility to ensure that we never see a repeat of those shocking scenes. Many of the riots panel's recommendations reflect this and support the government's work to strengthen socially responsible attitudes and reform public services. After his terrifying ordeal, the owner of this petrol station was inspired to help young people locally and will open a youth centre in Aston later this month.
It was such a traumatic experience. You could almost say, you know, like being in a war almost. It was like a war zone for those few days. And it had a really powerful effect on me and all the people that I knew. And it was a time for change, which is why we're here today. You know, we're opening the only youth club in the area, which is just a shipping container in a park.
Dennis Hamilton's son and friends were also inspired to do something, making a film about their experience.
It's out in September. I want to be recognised as filmmakers. I'm also trying to bring some of the youths that might have been involved into media, into television, etc. and try to get them to leave that negativity on the streets.
West Midlands Police still have images of 79 people on their website wanted in relation to the riots. 2 years on, their message is, "We'll find you," and they're calling on suspects to hand themselves in. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And let's talk now to Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth from West Midlands Police. Now, we're talking about the riots, which were 2 years ago, which is obviously hard to believe in itself. You're still looking for 79 suspects. Are you confident they will hand themselves in?
Well, I don't know if I'm confident they'll hand themselves in, but I'm absolutely confident that ultimately we'll bring them to justice, however long it takes. And my advice to them would be, don't sit there waiting for the knock at the door. Hand yourselves in and put it behind you and get it out of the way, because we will come for you and we will find you.
We saw on some of those pictures there the effect that the riots had on some of the communities involved. How was your relationship affected by the riots with those communities, and what's happened since in terms of maybe repairing those relationships?
Well, we don't underestimate the seriousness of the impact that this had and the tragic events back in August 2011. But strangely, there are some positive legacies from that, and you heard some of them in the films preceding this piece, around people being inspired to come together. And certainly from our perspective, we're in a much stronger position in terms of the relationships that we have with our communities as a result of what happened then.
Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but with hindsight, how would you describe how the riots were handled at the time?
Well, there was lots of discussion and debate both at the time and in the immediate aftermath, and I think if you look through, there was a huge range of reviews done immediately afterwards, and I think the response here in the West Midlands was recognised amongst being one of the best operational responses across the country. We made over 100 arrests on the first night of the riots here in Birmingham, and we've continued with that pace as well. We've arrested over 775 people now, and we'll have a relentless pursuit of those people that remain outstanding.
We also heard in Sally's report some degree of nervousness, people sort of almost waiting for something similar to happen again. What with cutbacks, particularly to the police, the number of police officers available to you, how confident are you and how can you reassure people that you would be ready to jump to action again if a similar thing happened?
Well, clearly there are fewer police officers across the country now than there were 2 years ago, but I can reassure people we've made lots of changes internally to how we do our business and lots of our processes to make sure we've got the right people in the right place at the right time. We've still got the same number of riot-trained officers now as we had 2 years ago. We've got much stronger national mobilisation procedures which enable us to bring officers in from across the country to swell a particular location at times of need.
What would your message be then to somebody who's watching who may well have been involved in the riots? What would you say to them?
Well, if you're watching and you're involved in the riots, I can be very clear. Hand yourselves in, because at this moment in time there are 79 images still on our website. They're very identifiable. If you're on there, we will find you, we'll come for you. If it takes the next 5 years, however long it takes, we'll come for you. And every knock at the door, whatever the time of day, you'll be wondering if that's us.
Okay.
Very clear. Assistant Chief Constable Gary Forsyth, thank you very much for joining us.
Now,